Very special to us. Psalm 23, it's on the back of your program. Read it with me if you would, please. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And another passage that comes to comfort us today are Jesus' very words about moments like these when we are in that space of uncertainty, and we're faced with the inevitability of our own mortality, when we experience heartache. He says there's something beyond what our senses can grasp, and this is what he tells us. He said, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. And Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God indeed. At this time, we want to enter into a time of remembering Barbara. We begin that. We're going to invite any and all of you who would like to share a brief memory of gratitude for her influence in your life to simply stand where you are. But we're going to start this time with her sons, Doug and Charlie. But actually, Charlie's going to go last. So, Doug, I invite you to come forward at this time for a few moments of sharing about your mom.
Just in case. Well, I've realized that you can't really practice for this. So I just want to start by giving some thanks to all of you who have come here and those who are with us in prayer and not able to be here, including my wife and my mom's 4 grandchildren. All right, and I just want to got to release the last moments and thank my dad's dear friends Don and Bo. So my dad's at the hospital dealing with a day that he didn't realize it was going to go down that way. He was making lunch and everything changed. So he's at the hospital. And he's alone. He's with staff and doctors, and even the doctor and the staff there are people I wanted to make sure I thanked, because they sure were an encouragement to my father. But I just said, Dad, you got to get somebody down there with you. And he just didn't want to inconvenience everybody. So Don and Bo showed up to the rescue, and it was perfect. Because Don Penrod could do what he does, and that's just be a rock and notice details that might slip by other people and kind of keep a steady hand on the steering wheel. And Bo is able to do what he does best, and that's communicate. And so I'm in Michigan, and Charlie's in Tennessee. We're getting constant updates from Bo about what's going on, and I'm throwing in suggestions, Charlie is, and even had a couple conference calls. But during all that, Don could stay focused on my dad and the present situation. So it was perfect. So thank you guys very much. I also got a hold of Pastor Don somehow that late at night. And thank you so much for taking my call and calling my dad and having one foot in the car on the way before my dad didn't want to inconvenience you. And for coming the next morning to spend some time with my dad. And my brother,
You're right, Doug, you cannot practice it.
who I just look up to and always have. And his wife, Kim, I'm so glad you're here. Okay. I also just want to point out that his friends at United Methodist Church, the American Legion, his CAP friends, his softball buddies, his neighborhood people, golf friends, and moms love the Republican Party friends. You all are such a source of encouragement and support to my dad, and you fill his life with joy and meaning. So thank you. I know this is supposed to be about my mom, but her life was my dad in a lot of ways. And what a role model of a father. You know, it's stuff that you always should have said all along, right? It takes something like this. But man, when I was a kid, I just saw my dad as such a class act. I knew people respected him and admired him, and I did too, and I wanted to grow up to be like him. So spending those 20 years playing softball with you is awesome. I'm glad you gave up a lot of long fly balls for me to track down. My dad would always plan things. He was a planner. He had things laid out. He didn't necessarily always have all the resources, but we never knew that. But he planned stuff. He planned out like he's got his legacy drawer. When the time comes, he's got everything laid out and organized for us, and that is an act of love and a model that I still need to implement for my family. So, thank you. One skill I developed from my dad was the ability to pack a trunk in a car with more stuff than you'd ever think would fit. And so, Dad, you were the role model of consistency and predictability, and you made life easy growing up as a kid, and I appreciate that. And my mom and dad together created a home that was stable, predictable. It gave me confidence as I learned about life and grew. and you planted a seed about Jesus Christ in me that never grew until these last 5 or 6 years. But boy, I'm glad you planted the seed. And you had an expectation of excellence from Charlie and I. The only downside of that is I spend my life trying to live up to it. But thank you for creating that standard, and I appreciate that. As far as my yeah, Dad.
No.
As far as my mom goes, I just remember seeing this picture of her at her wedding, and some others like it, and I just thinking she looks like a movie star. And my dad was lucky to snag her. And the boyfriend previous doesn't know what he missed. But what I learned from my mom, she always used to say, she would just pound on being considerate. Of course, part of that was pointing out when people weren't being considerate. So, but she just pounded on being considerate with people, and like that is a value that just drives me every day, and one I'm glad I carry with me, and it's directly from my mom. And there's a whole list of things we could talk about, but another one was worry. My mom worried a lot, but through her worry, I also learned, you're gonna worry, but you got to do it in a way that doesn't cause other people to worry. So in a way, I learned that from my mom. And I treasure that. Her love of music, something I carry with me. I love music, and that came from my mom. I just wish I could dance like her. And she is dancing light on her feet right now. And she can be proud. So I want to just share with you the final connection. Sometimes we lose people and we don't get a chance to make that connection and get complete, and they leave us and we feel incomplete. And I'm blessed because I got complete with my mom. She, as most of you know, she had Alzheimer's, and she didn't remember much and really couldn't connect the dots to carry on much of a conversation for the last couple of years at all. But my dad had an opportunity to go to his prep school and accept an induction to the Hall of Fame for his father. But he wouldn't be able to go because my mom couldn't travel, or it just wouldn't have been a good idea. But he wanted to go, and the best gift that I could give my dad was to say, hey, I'll watch Mom. You go with Charlie. You represent first generation, second generation. My daughter, Kristen, and her now husband, Brian, showed up to represent the next generation, and I got to spend a week with my mom. So I'm going to tell you about that. But before I do, again, you don't have a chance to practice this kind of stuff too, right? So when I was telling you about my dad and his characteristics and his impact on me, I missed the main part. And that is the way that he cared for my mom through this process. Before the process, during the process, such loyalty that it's now part of me too. But boy, he cared for her, and there's a definition of love that my dad expressed every day. And it was by Scott Peck in a book called The Road Less Traveled, and this is how he defined love, and my dad acted this out flawlessly. Not without some impatience or frustration at times, but it was all with love because he just wanted the best for her. So here's how Scott Peck defined love. Love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. Will also implies choice. That's why God gave us free will, right? We have the choice to love. Wouldn't be love if you didn't have a choice and choose to love God, right? So, we do not have to love, we choose to love is the final part of his definition. And my dad just extended himself for her benefit every day. And I admire you so much. So, on to the closing part of this, and that's the connection that I made with my mom. They were all gone. I got to spend time with her, try to help her eat as she's eating with the wrong hand and the wrong utensil and, all that stuff that goes with that. And one day, toward the end of the trip, as I was starting to get to see how to get in her, and that was to play the music she grew up with, and she was singing to the music. And she seemed to be starting to come alive, and I'd just be pumping as much food in her as I could, and offering her an apple, and she'd have some, and 5 minutes later offering it again, counting on it. She knew she wouldn't remember that she just had somebody. Let me get nutrition into her. And I think by the end of that week, she was starting to, it seemed like there was something coming through, and she would say many times during the week when we would talk about, hey Mom, you're coming up to visit us in Michigan in a couple months. Oh, I won't be around by then. She kept saying, I won't be around by then. I won't be around by then. And so finally I started asking her about that. I said, Mom, you keep saying you won't be around by then. What's going on? She goes, well, I'm old. And she started to cry. And I asked her if she was afraid of dying. She cried more. And I knew she was in there. She was in there. So I asked her, I said, do you think about heaven? She gave an unsure yes. And what I'm going to tell you now means a lot to those of us who are true believers in Christ. It might not mean much to those of you who aren't, but to those of us who are, this means everything. I asked her, did you ever turn your life over to Jesus? Asked him to save you, take you to heaven? And she just perked right up and said, I did that when I was a little girl. That was the first full sentence she said all week. So we can all be comforted in that knowledge in a lot of the same ways that you've been comforting my father through this. In closing, I have a poem. Don Penrod made a book, poems he wrote. He told me to go to the back of the book, and there was one that he didn't write. He thought it might comfort me, and it did, and I think it will comfort us all. It's by George R. Mansour, I guess. But it says, when I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in the gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not too long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that once was shared. Miss me, but then let me go. For this is a journey we all must take, and each must go alone. It's all part of the Master's plan, a step on the road home. When you're lonely and sick of heart, go to the friends we know and bury your sorrows in doing good deeds. Miss me, but let me go. And so I know all that's heavy stuff, but what we really love is to hear from some of her friends. Family, don't feel obligated, but if there is something in your heart that you would like to share about my mom, my dad, our family, memories, a funny thing, we would love to hear it, especially the funny thing. So don't feel obligated, but you can stand up where you are and share. I guess if you're comfortable coming up here, you could, but it's, you can just share from where you are. And if nobody chooses to, or when it seems like it's winding down, then my brother will come up and be the closer. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug, very much.
Of course, I knew Barbara from day one as a brother. And the thing I can remember so vividly about Barbara, no matter whether she was in junior high or high school, she always associated with the people that mattered, that did things that were more than there just for an academic, that had a social life. And she had great choices. But her best choice of all was when she brought Ludlow Earl Bretz home from Vietnam.
What I'd like to share about Barbara several things is her laughter. She always laughed. She found something to laugh about. And the last time I heard her laugh, really heartily, was when her brother was here just a few months ago. And he was telling something funny about a nursing home. And she understood. She really did. But the one thing I want to share is that she's a Republican. Anybody that knows Barbara, she's a Republican. And she belonged to the Republican Club, and she brought in a lot of members. And this one particular time, she said she was at shopping center, and someone's car indicated they might be a Republican. So she followed them home. She followed them up to become a member of the Republican Club.
That's all those Brussels
I hooked up with the Tredennick clan in about 54, I guess. I was in the service and saw Marlene at church. I knew the family and attended many of their Christmas parties, which was always a hoot. Then whenever they got married, they moved to Michigan. We had the opportunity to move to Michigan as well and became associated some more with them, and by that time they had their family. Then Bud retired and he moved to Florida, and we had a vacation down here, and I retired from Ford and came to Florida, so we've been trailing them wherever they went. And of course Nick and the whole bit, they've been a great family, and we have a small family, but they've always been a part of us.
You said, would there be a funny thing? I'm representing the Legion on Tuesdays. This is Tuesday. Bud and Barbara were always at lunch, and Bud's love for Barbara, we had to find a toaster for the BLT that Barbara wanted. And his love, we found the toaster, and we always got the tomatoes cut really thin. We failed one thing, and that's the bread is still a little thick, but in honor of Barbara, we'll keep working on that one. She truly was a wonderful lady.
Good, I'm going to tell one story since we have to say jokes.
Since we have to say.
When Barbara was young, Gene Kelly, who was then just a dance instructor, would come in from Pittsburgh to give lessons. And the mothers would all bring their kids down to learn lessons from Gene Kelly. Not so much whether they learned, they wanted to be there when Gene Kelly was there. So Barbara had a hard time learning the steps. And Gene Kelly would get down on his knee and say, "Barbara, Barbara, you're breaking my heart." So this went on. Of course, Gene Kelly left. He went into Broadway, then became a movie star. So many years later, in 1945, my uncle was shipping off to Okinawa, and my aunt has a job as a reporter for the LA Times. She's covering a fundraiser for Gene Kelly, who was trying to sell bonds. And she went up and she said, "I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the aunt of Barbara Tredennick and Gene Kelly," without flicking an eyelash, said, "Barbara, Barbara, you're breaking my heart."
When you're at church, the tradition is that you don't discuss politics. But there's a certain table in Fellowship Hall after the 11 o'clock service that you only can be at if you're a Republican. So when I first started in the church, I had to be checked out, make sure I could pass, and then I was always welcome to that table every week. And John and I would make a point of, no matter how crazy our morning was, of saying good morning. And Barbara, as she became older over the years, she became quieter, but she always had that glow that said, "I'm here, I'm listening, I'm sparkling with life, and I'm grateful that I'm part of the Republican table." Thank you for letting her share with us.
May I say something funny? Patty, you have clothes on. Now, there's a story behind it. When I arrived at church this morning, Patty came out and she was doing something with the kids, running the vacation Bible school. And she had shorts on and a top, etc. And she was not aware that the service was going to be today at 2. And she said, "I hadn't planned for that. And besides that, I'm not dressed for that." I said, "Yes, you are dressed for that. Please, do come." Well, here she is. You didn't have to do that.
Well, I have no planned remarks. I didn't know we were going to do this. I'll just tell you, it's been a special privilege to know Barbara and Bud Bretz, going back, I think, to about '03. And so many memories have come back as a result of this service. I met Bud through another great national and local institution, which is our Civil Air Patrol Squadron in Punta Gorda. And the way that the Bretzes operate is you don't actually get to volunteer for stuff, you are ordered to do things. So we became friends, and there was an election impending at that time, and I got the call and said, "Come on, we got to go put out yard signs and bumper stickers," and we must have put yard signs and stickers at every conceivable likely location in South and East Charlotte County and the Cape Ace Peninsula. And I also knew Barbara at her most energetic during those times. She was very energetic. Someone said something about her inviting all of the different people to participate in, you name it, American Legion, Republican Club, I'm sure the church, you name it. If she decided somebody was a likely candidate, she was on it. I know that Bud and Barbara also loved to dance and did so for many years, until within the last 2 years. And as Doug has said, the spark was in there right till the end. It took some drawing out, but it was amazing how she would perk up sometimes and participate in conversations. And Don and I were just talking about that last week after we lost her, that even the last few months, occasionally she would come plug back into a conversation just like nothing had ever changed. And I credit that entirely to her husband. I've been around a lot of elderly people in my line of work and through my life. Been in a lot of nursing homes, and I've lost my parents in the last few years. I can tell you, people who have senile dementia or Alzheimer's tend to go downhill a lot faster and just be kind of not there anymore unless someone or some family is constantly doing their best to re-energize them, to talk to them, to take them places. Bud would take her out to dinner every Saturday night without fail. And Charlie and Doug and their families came down as often as they possibly could. So it's been a genuine privilege and an unexpected privilege to get to know these great people.
Thank you both.
I'd like to say something quickly. I moved down here about 13 years ago, and conservative all my life. I was looking for a gang to get hooked up with. And I happened to be at a restaurant one day talking to a girl about something. I can't remember what. She gave me some free tickets to go to a speech of a guy who's running for office down here. I said, well, it's free hamburgers and stuff. I said, no, I'll go. I didn't get in the front door, Barbara attacked me. And signed me up to the club that quick. So we've known Barbara and Earl for the last 13 years. Now we're not the kind of friends where we're in each other's house all the while. We're the kind of friends that respect each other and love each other. And we love your mom. And I'm so glad to hear you talk to her about Jesus before she left.
Well, I just want to thank Pastors Don and Vic and the director of music, Fonda. That was wonderful. Thanks for playing, and thanks for playing the sheet music, because the music that was played was sang at their wedding way back in '53, and very special, obviously. So, but we're here for the celebration of the life of my mother, and it is a celebration. You know, my mother, your mother-in-law, your bride, your wife, your sister, your sister-in-law, your cousin, and all the friends. So it's just a month ago, I guess it was late April, Doug and I had planned a trip here, so we really need to get here. You know, Dad needs some help, and you could just hear it over the phone that he needed some help. So we said, well, let's get together again as a family and just try to do it a couple times a year, the four of us. You know, little did we know that we only had a few more weeks with her in our life. But, you know, this week starts the grieving process for my dad, but for me, I believe it was a couple of years back when all of a sudden I went up to his house in Michigan and I saw my mother, and I said, that's not my mother. I knew she had this disease, but I did not know how quickly it robbed everything that she knew. And I wasn't used to that. So for the last couple of years, I've been grieving, you know. So I've been preparing for this day